final installment of my most favorite underrated films. I'm going with The Appaloosa, the original from 1966. Spoiler alert, I'm going to be talking about a lot of plot points and details of the film, so I highly recommend watching the film first before watching this video. My third pick for the most underrated films is the original The Appaloosa from 1966. The primary reason for this movie being on my list is that it matches the most important criteria I have for my favorite films. Namely, The Appaloosa has a captivating story with an exciting third act, it has believable dialogue with convincing performances, and it has extremely well-crafted cinematography. In regards to the cinematography, it should be noted that the movie is shot in Technicolor, which I think is perfectly suited for the Western genre, with the wide and long shots of the open plains of the frontier. The cinematographer Russell Meddy has a highly impressive resume, including his role as director of photography of widely renowned classics such as Touch of Evil, starring Orson Welles and Charlton Heston, The Stranger, starring Edward G. Robinson and Orson Welles, also directed by the latter, and Meddy's most noteworthy claim to fame is being DP of Stanley Kubrick's Spartacus, starring Kirk Douglas. One shot in particular in which Meddy's expertise is exhibited is the scene where Marlon Brando's character Matt experiences a moment of consideration between two options. There is light on half of his face and darkness on the other. This clever use of lighting helps accentuate and emphasize the inner conflict the character has within his head due to the pivotal decision he must make. In my opinion, this is an absolutely brilliant use of symbolism implemented through Russell Meddy's cinematography. Furthermore, there are a couple general details of Meddy's work that should be acknowledged in this film. Specifically, he presents exquisitely beautiful establishing shots at the beginning of scenes, as well as many different camera angles and shot framing throughout the film, so that the visuals are not repetitive nor unstimulating and are instead tremendously compelling and consistently eye-catching. Of The Appaloosa, which may be a reason for its lack of notoriety and popularity, is sound and audio, or lack thereof, because for most of the film, or it seems about half of it, there's really no dialogue, scoring, or sound effects at all. I think this is characteristic of the movie, and it's totally appropriate considering its setting and subject matter. The Western frontier was desolate and consequently quiet. Also, the characters experience a lot of inner turmoil and contemplation. So instead of overly dramatically conveying the character's deliberation with sentimental music, the sparse scoring and dialogue yield a more realistic atmosphere. And in regards to the soundtrack, the music was done by the composer Frank Skinner, who did the scoring for Alfred Hitchcock's film Saboteur and another very famous classic called Harvey, starring James Stewart. However, in The Appaloosa, Frank Skinner brings a different kind of vibe with an Ennio Morricone-esque style of scoring that is Latin influenced and orchestral, and is often used primarily between scenes to conclude the mood of the previous scene or to set the mood for the upcoming scene. Okay, so before I wrap up here and briefly discuss why I think the story is so terrific and talk about why I think it's so underrated, I want to quickly mention that I think that the performances of every moment from every actor and actress on screen comes across truly authentic for each character's personality and situation in the story. And of course, the two main lead roles should be highlighted: John Saxon as the antagonist, Chewie Medina, and Marlon Brando as the protagonist, Matt, as they both present these fairly complex characters with strongly persuasive performances. Two interesting attributes of Chewie Medina are that despite his leadership role and tough guy persona, he is desperately worried about what his gang thinks of him, which is why he lies about his wife trying to escape on Matt's Appaloosa horse. And secondly, another intriguing attribute is that his family has been severely oppressed by colonizers, and this is why he's hugely resentful and absolutely ruthless toward outsiders. Okay, so a couple things that add depth to Matt's identity is that the Appaloosa horse is symbolic to him as it represents fulfilling an obligation to provide for the family of the man who raised him as his own son. Also, another aspect that adds an additional layer and makes Matt a more dynamic character is that he recently has returned from war and asked for forgiveness in a church confessional,
while voicing his intent to never kill again. He desires to become a farmer. However, as happenstance would have it, he re-enters a world of violence and death upon meeting Chewy Medina. The story itself is, in my opinion, a wonderful yet somewhat simplistic tale about a war veteran trying to start a new life for himself, but just as he begins to start his new journey, he is thrust into a deadly debacle between a battered wife desperate to escape from a horrible husband/gang leader. The veteran Matt is quickly detoured from his goal of building a simpler life to engaging in revenge and rescue. The story is riddled with duplicitous characters, themes of honor, and many dangerous and deadly situations. When viewers look back on Marlon Brando's work, as he is such an iconic actor, I believe that they are much more likely to first see his more popular work and then compare his lesser known movies to his most highly renowned pictures. Obviously, these films are so critically acclaimed that I don't really even need to mention them. However, just as an example to give some perspective, On the Waterfront and The Godfather are absolutely sensational films, and it is justifiable to argue that they are more artistic and enjoyable than The Appaloosa. However, if critics or fans of these movies compare those masterpieces to The Appaloosa while they're watching it, they end up getting a skewed perception and undue influence that will stifle their enjoyment of a, quite frankly, really phenomenal film. Finally, I think another reason why The Appaloosa might be underrated is because it is a bit of a slow burn. I mean, it has a compelling enough pace, but the violence is fairly infrequent, and the main action and conflict takes some time to arise. Nevertheless, I think it works well in this film.
Alright, so that is my review of The Appaloosa, my most favorite underrated film. Like, subscribe, and comment below.